Hello and welcome everybody to the weird world of knowing. We are here today with a very special guest. It's very personal to me. Now, we only met in November 2021. We didn't actually speak for very long, actually, did we, Michael? But actually the effect that you had on me was extremely profound. So it felt really important that I brought you on to the podcast because I have lots of questions for you. Because I'm Rachel Earing, everybody. I'm getting carried away straight into the fold, and I've got the most wonderful guest, Michael Spayd, with us today. So Michael is the founder and chief executive of the collective Edge. And Michael has worked in the energy field really for how long, Michael?
Well, probably 30 years in a sort of a underground way, like not very out with it. I've become more and more pronounced with it, and it's directly what I do. Only more recently, really. But I've worked with different kinds of energy ways of working with the world, I guess, for quite a while.
And you've worked with it in very different, many ways, in many modalities, forms, haven't you? So the spectrum that you've actually worked with, I think, is really going to come into the conversation as we go on. Let us go straight into why you're actually on here for me.
Great.
I believe that's going to help an awful lot of people. Now, I'm an energy therapist and I train people with TARC EFT, which is emotional freedom technique. And that's the background behind emotional freedom technique. So we go into each tapping point and look behind all of that. And I'm also a trainer in something called mindfulness-based and repatterning, Reiki and other things, so that we blend all of that together with each client. And of course, that involves lots of different experiences for the client. And I tune into their energy field with them and we experience that together. And that's what keeps us safe. Now, as I've been on my own journey, obviously there has been many weird points of knowings that I've had to sort of work through myself and come to understand. And with the help of people like yourself, and we all need this help, everybody. We all need help from somebody else to be able to put into words, to decipher, to understand exactly what is happening. This experience that I had at Broughton was an event that you sort of scheduled outside of the main event. And in the evening, we went into the drawing room and you held a Constellation session. And there were about 20 of us, maybe a little bit more in that room, sat in a circle. And then if you could just explain what you actually set up, and then I will explain what I experienced.
Right. You may need to help me with what I set up, but I know the basic. I remember the basics of it. It's a methodology, or I think of it as a human technology, an energetic technology called systemic constellations, and it's a way to create a living picture of a system. It started with families, but it can be used for teams or organizations or society or countries, and the populace of a country or whatever. And in this case, what we set up was just a really small experiment for, I don't know, was it groups of 2 or 3? Maybe, I think it was 3.
Well, actually, this is the group session before we went into actual 1s and 2s and 3s. I'd like you, if you don't.
Yeah, sure.
When you were in the center of the room and you were the community, and each person that was there represented something else. I think somebody was a grape and somebody was something else.
So we just represented different aspects of the land or at Broughton Hall, right? You may remember more than I do, but just the technology itself, it allows a person to stand in as a representative of some other system. For instance, the land at Broughton, or just kind of different elements. Like we had a basket, I think you're referring to, of sacred objects. And people, there's like the way I understand it for myself is it's like creates a quantum entanglement between that piece of the system and you, and so you start to resonate as if you were that thing, and so you get understanding and knowledge that you, from a traditional, like a Newtonian point of view, you have no business getting. You couldn't possibly be able to get it, but yet that's what happens.
And that is exactly what happened for me.
Yeah, what happened?
Yeah, I wasn't even involved in that group in the middle of the collective. So this is what threw me a little, because I was really interested in what was happening, and it actually looked like a little play. It looked like you were making a character.
Yes.
And you were playing out and representing a grape and what a grape might do or say, and the collective being the group of people that were representing, and then Broughton Hall, etc. So it really was like we were watching a little play pan out, but without much dialogue, because the things that people were doing were really quite movements of the body. Like you dropped to the floor at one point. As you dropped to the floor, and I was looking around the room, and bearing in mind, we've got scientists in this room, we've got very conscious people, very intelligent academics are in that room, which intimidate me, because I'm not one of those people. I'd love to be one of those people. I'd love to be able to speak very intellectually about the things that, about science and physics and how consciousness actually works on that basis. But I can't, and I don't. I speak from my own experience. Now, my own experience of these are very physical. I have very physical reactions, and my body responds in ways that sometimes I really do not want it to. And over the years, to be honest, I feel stupid. And you do, because it's not something I'm necessarily always in control of, because it happens when I'm least expecting it. So as I was picking up the energy of that room, and you dropped to the floor on your knees, and somebody else was being a grape, and I'm thinking, oh God, this is so weird, what is going on? I started to retch. And not just a little, sat in the corner where nobody would notice.
Right.
I was literally in the middle of that room, and I was literally going, and it literally came out with that disgusting noise, but I had no control. It was just, I thought, I am either going to be physically violently ill here. I was half moving out of my chair to sort of run out of the room as it happened, but then fortunately it was just the noise. Now that happened to me 3 times throughout that process, and I had no, if I could, literally, I would have subdued it. I really would. I didn't want that to happen in that environment where I wanted to be thought highly of, but it was a real guttural experience, and it was a real connection to, gosh, I really feel like the grape is so disgusted with us. The way that we've treated the grape, and the way that we have treated and abused it over the years with the wine, and how we treat it, and how we drink it, and how we behave with it all. And it was as if I was connecting with the community and with the grape, but on a very deep guttural essence.
Yeah, right. Yes.
And I'd like you to explain that, please. I know that's
well, I'm not sure I can explain it, but
is that normal response?
Well, so here's what I would suspect happened from your description. So I don't even remember, honestly. I remember we did a demonstration of taking several objects, these sacred objects, right? That's what we were doing. But what happened, I would suggest, so you are a really sensitive person energetically, right? So you pick up on the energy. Other people are sort of blind to it, frankly.
Yeah.
So there's people in a whole spectrum, right? You're on one pretty extreme in terms of sensitivity, maybe an empath, whatever.
Yeah.
And you just get drawn to those things. So when you set up a field like that, we were talking about the relationship of people to the land there, and to sacred objects that are used for plant medicine and different things. And sometimes you don't represent everything that's in the field, but the field shows up. So some element of the field showed up, and you got drafted essentially by the field into that position.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, total sense to me.
And so it reminds me of a Constellation I did in Europe at a big integral conference with like about 400 people. It was the biggest constellation I've ever, I wasn't directing it, but, and it was about the relationship of Europe and all different countries in Europe and the United States, and it was representing mainly and the EU, and just different elements of that. And the person that I was with was not picked as a representative, but she became really emotionally tied into what was going on. And she was representing something in that field that wasn't named, but it was there.
Yeah.
And someone like you that has sensitivity are more likely to get drafted into that role for the system, because the system, there's some sense in which the system wants to see itself, or those elements wants to be presence, like for you, that disgust or that wretchedness of the harm that's been done vibrated with you somehow.
And that does make sense to me, because I have such a personal, I suppose it is disgust. I don't want it to be, but I suppose it is, because my father was a chronic alcoholic. When it comes to alcohol, and that's what it did feel like we'd really abused the grape in the form that it had taken like that. It was literally rose from the depths of me and just had to express that way, which was deeply unnerving, but I understood completely what that meant.
So yeah, and I would suggest that there was two levels of things going on. One had to do with the system that we were representing in the room, and another had to do with the systems that you've been in, like in your family. And we tend to get, like, when somebody, let's say we're setting up a family, and somebody chooses you to be a certain aunt, let's say. There's usually something very unconscious that's a synchronicity or an entanglement between that aunt that you're representing and your psychology that we don't, so what people talk about is, we do a constellation as sort of a healing movement for the person whose family or team or whatever is being brought, but a lot of times the people that are chosen to represent get more out of it, or as much out of it as the person whose system is represented. So there's this dual level going on, that your issues are being worked or presenced or something, as well as the group or the system that we're setting up. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense, because that's exactly what happens when we are sending remote healing, for whether that be Reiki, whether that be with the tapping, whether that be MBIR. When we connect with that person that we're sending the healing to, it really is incredible what actually comes up with the feelings, the emotions, the thoughts,
yes,
and how usually so accurate it is when we get feedback from that person, and they're very surprised as to that actually happens. But that tends to be more on a personal, emotional type level, and I think that's what I know I'm most certainly tuned into. It seems to be very emotional with me, and it's taken me a long time it took me 40 odd years to accept really that I needed to go and work on myself, because I couldn't live with myself much longer with feeling everything that I was feeling. It was so intense. I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah. I get drawn to people that have I don't think I have the same level of sensitivity. I certainly have fairly strong sensitivity, but not anything like yours. But a lot of people that have that get drawn to me for some reason. And part of it, I think, is how I would describe that in you, or in people that have that sensitivity, is that you are a very precise, beautiful instrument that gets played by the energy, essentially. And if you start to take that personally, or try to control it or something, you're toast.
Yeah,
it's gonna destroy you. And to allow the energy to go through you and be in service, but also put a boundary. This is not me. this is not mine. It's going to flow through me, and I'm going to give a message perhaps, or allow that energy to presence through me for a little while. And then I'm going to let it go. I'm going to do psychic hygiene kind of moves too.
Oh gosh, that is so, so pertinent and so absolutely spot on, because and the wording that you use about being a musical instrument is exactly the wording that I use. With having all these strings inside us, and
yes,
once
yes,
we get dirt on, we can't play that beautiful music.
yes, right.
Once we get rid of all that
Yes,
dirt,
right,
and
right,
add it
yes,
on
yes,
from death to us,
yes,
then actually
yes.
really most incredible things start to happen. But please don't think that you are always in control of it, because the more you flow with it, the more surprisingly weird things happen.
Yes.
But they bring you that deep, really deep sense of knowing that is only pertinent to you and your life story.
Yes.
Or the person that you are with as you're passing on that information. And I know that another example of that, just within the podcast that I'm doing, and when I did, if you look up Bill McAllister's podcast, you will notice that something quite weird happened there. As I was talking to Bill, somebody else came through, and I kept constantly calling him somebody else. It turned out that it was somebody who had just recently passed, who was very, very close to him. I could have got very embarrassed at one point.
Right. Yeah.
And said, look, I want to stop this. Let's re-record it. I'm obviously making a mistake. I know you're called Bill, but obviously the name just keeps popping out, and I just don't know why it's happening. But it was that connection to that person that was trying to come through, so that he knew.
Yes. And you have like a Stradivarius violin as your instrument, as your body mind, and it can be played, and that's the danger too, on a certain level, that that spirit could speak through you, or feel through you, essentially, or manifest itself through you. So you can see why. So like you said, it was your father who was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Like, so think about how a gift like that, you could want to deaden it with alcohol. I mean, that would be one. It's not a very useful coping strategy, but it's an understandable coping strategy to numb the noise of that. I mean, those things come in through our lineage. I mean, maybe your father had it, or maybe an ancestor had it too, and wasn't able. You're manifesting in a very conscious, deliberate, intentional way, and in service way.
Yeah.
And some people just can't pull that off.
Well, I think it's funny that we are discussing my father. We weren't intending to do this, but actually the reason I know that my father was on that path was because he needed to give us, myself and my brother, such a powerful lesson of what not to do, how not to be. It put him through absolute hell, but I do believe he chose to do that so that we would learn another way.
Wow.
Through that learning, and through being so conscious about really striving to not be like that, and make sure that we did everything that we possibly can. 2 days before he passed, we had a very knowing moment at a workshop my brother attended, very strangely, because he never attends anything that I do really, but he turned up for this one. We conversed and discussed my father and his journey and what it had brought us to, and we knew that this connection had passed through to my dad as well, he wasn't great at the time, and within 24 hours my dad passed over, and we knew he knew he'd completed his soul journey, his path, and it was a very pertinent, deep, meaningful message for my brother that put us on even more consciously. We are most certainly on the right path, but obviously we've still got so many questions to ask, because we've been doing this maybe for 10 years, and that's only just the tip of what we can learn and uncover, and the beauty of everything that is out there. So we should have all these questions, and So tell us a little bit more about the Agile world.
Hang on, I just want to
Okay.
I just want to let this moment in. That was that felt emotional to me. You saying that, and you know, it helped me feel great compassion for your father,
Mm.
and yeah, it just makes me want to cry.
Oh, thank you, Michael. It was so deeply, and there's so many people I think out there who are going through addiction, and families that are watching and involved in this. And I'm not saying it gets easier when they are still here. It's a really painful and difficult path to go down, but the more you do work on yourself, rather than expecting that person to change,
Right. Yeah.
all about self. The more
Yeah.
you do that work on yourself, the more
Yeah.
that connection makes sense
Yeah.
at a very deep level. And you find some peace. You do really find some peace.
Yeah. I can feel that in the way you talk.
Absolutely. And I'm really connected to my dad now, and it's in the most it's just a joyful way. Literally, it's such a joy now to be connected with him, because he's there in all nature, you know, the birds especially. And you know, I only need to get distracted by one bird really tweeting very loudly, and I know that he's around. It's again, that's another beautiful way to experience my father, because
yes, yeah.
It used to be that way. We would have
did.
little tiny moments. It's I understand, and that's so powerful.
Yeah, and there's some, he achieved some level of liberation.
Yes.
And that's what the constellation work does. It does healing for the ancestors too. I mean, the ancestors want our happiness, and they want to be let go of the, you know, you made me think too that for myself, my relationship with my parents has gotten way better since they passed. I mean, and it's still alive. I mean, I can, you know, I used to resist my mother and her energy and stuff, and now I'm much more at peace with it, and I can feel the attributes that she gave me, and actually the same thing with my father in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it brings peace, doesn't it? I'm feeling that now.
Yeah.
Hoping that the listeners are. There is such a deep level of peace that comes with that journey. With our parents. And I know that we put a lot of focus on our children, but actually, when we make peace with our parents, it makes that journey with our children all the more easy.
Yes, absolutely.
Easier, should I say?
Yeah, we say that in the constellation world that if love can't flow to you from your parents, it can't flow through you.
Yes.
So we one of the things we do sometimes in a constellation is to bow to our parents. For however horrible they've been in certain ways, they gave us life. And there's a preciousness about that, in a sense in which we're always smaller than our parents. They always came before us. I mean, that's just a systemic fact, and we can't deny that, or we stop the flow of love to and life to ourselves.
Absolutely.
You have a a very powerful way of bringing, you know, a deep presence.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of forgot about, you know, what our sharing was like at the conference, and now I can feel it. Now I'm like, oh yeah, I remember, because it was like this. and that's generated, it feels like to me, by your presence and your, you know, your gift, and you're using your gift. So
it's
appreciation.
Funny. Thank you. I so appreciate you. I really do. And I was so excited that you were coming on today. I had to calm myself down because I get a bit giddy with these podcasts. and I was reminded today with a really wonderful lady who bared her soul so freely, and she's so eloquent with it on a Facebook post, and she's a very good, very, very good communicator with her voice and with the written word. And I do envy people. I can't help it. I do envy people like that, because that part of me, as yet, doesn't flow quite as freely. And I know that when I'm on a one-to-one basis, when I'm feeling comfortable, I flows much more easily. I'm much better with people when we're in a room together, and I can feel their energy.
Right. Sure.
I resonated, and I replied to her post, and she sent through this beautiful voicemail, and I was really compelled to say to her, look, the gift that you have really is about communication. It is about that spoken word. It's how you deliver it. It's how you make people feel. And it is a real true gift in all the rawness that you give us, because it is very raw. It connects with us on that guttural level that we can't help but resonate, even if it makes us feel quite disgusting about ourselves, because we want to hide it. We don't want to, don't want to go there, because we all have these feelings. But I said, and I do want to be able to communicate like that, but I know that when I am full with deep gratitude of being in the presence of certain people, as this podcast is giving me that real gratitude of connection again, sometimes I'm finding myself so full that I'm unable to communicate verbally. I can feel it coming out of every other pore, and I can feel it coming out of my eyes. I know that that is how I express that gratitude. It's also a way that I don't really want to tame down, because that intensity of I know who I am with that gratitude, that feeling that we have is what propels us forward. And I know that the secret in all its glory doesn't tell you about the power of that feeling of gratitude that propels you forward into doing things and moving forward with it. That is a healing process all on its own. Does that make sense to you?
Sure, totally.
And I'm hoping, listeners, this is making some sense to some of you, because I know there are empaths out there like myself who have been struggling to find an outlet for communicating how you feel, what's blocked inside, how it makes you feel, what to do with it. I think it's that the big question is, what do you do with all that intense emotion that is in there, and is it all yours?
Right.
So what can people do with it, Michael?
Search me. Well, from one point of view, all that feeling, whatever it is, from a non-dual ultimate point of view, it's empty. It's just the play of the mind. It's not even ours. We tend to take it very personally. Like I said, we tend to think even in our actual relationships with other people, we tend to take what they do personally, and we don't need to. That's actually just a projection, right? And if we can work with our own mind and mental states, whether it's ours or somebody else's, we have to get better at being able to work with it and to let it go and to just identify with it. Not repress it, but let it, you're sort of describing a process of letting energy flow through you, not blocking it. So the first step is often to repress, and a different level is to identify with, and a third step is to let go, right? To allow, I work with this technique called the Sedona method, which is about a way to release things, stories and pain, protecting ourselves, seeking love, whatever. And the first step is always to allow it. You have to allow. You can't fight with reality. You can't fight with what's coming. I mean, we try, but it doesn't work, right? So the first step of letting go is to allow it to be there, whatever that feeling is, and then to just it just sort of naturally unwinds. I don't know that was responsive to your question.
Oh yes, absolutely. Some people might want to know how to unwind. So can you explain how the Sedona method works?
I'd certainly urge people to go to the Sedona, I think it's Sedona.com or maybe SedonaMethod.com. Look it up. A guy named Hale Dwoskin, Dwoskin. But if he asks you questions, can you, you're experiencing something really intense. Could you welcome that?
Mm.
And you can actually say yes or no to the questions, whatever is true. And even saying no, it still unwinds. It's kind of ironic. Could you release that? Could you let it go? Would you let it go?
Mm.
When? And you ask those questions sort of slowly. It's better. I prefer it in a recording where somebody else is asking the questions. I can ask them to myself, but it doesn't. It just doesn't work as well.
Yeah, I think it's that connection of energy and you feeling safe enough to, because we're very good at distracting ourselves, very good at distraction. Our whole lives have been spent in our energy field, distracting us from the pain that we have felt. So
yeah.
tell us to go and put the washing on, or go and do the garden, anything, so
Right.
that we don't need to go there. So I really do relate to that, but that connection, which is why I think there are so many people out there now. And if any of you are wondering why are there so many coaches, why are there so many therapists, why are there so many people doing all of this? And the reason that there are so many people coming to the fold and actually, wanting to change their lives, they're changing their lives by actually sharing and giving back this gift of connection. And as we share this connection and we support each other and accept each other exactly as we are, where we are right here and now, with all our faults, with no judgment, that connection really helps to unfold and untangle all the knots so that our instruments can play really beautiful music. And even if we don't know what that piece of music is going to be yet, it can be more complicated and absolutely bliss than we could possibly imagine. It could take us on that jazz trail that we never expected, but wow, that just blows your mind. We never know what's going to happen when it starts to unfold, and I think that's the beauty of it.
I was going to bring it back to another point you made about that you are not comfortable in groups and speaking, sort of public speaking kind of presentation, but one-on-one you're really comfortable with people. And I think it's really cool, using the one-on-one format in a podcast you're leveraging your ability to connect with people and have something magical happen, and then broadcasting it to other people so that a bunch of people can see it, but you're not in the situation where if you were doing this live with lots of people, maybe that would intimidate you, or you wouldn't be as in flow.
But I'd not really even thought of that, but it makes so much sense to me. That's probably exactly why I am doing this, because I know I've got a talk coming up in May. I know I've got to prepare for it. So I've set up this podcast in that preparation for actually being able to stand there and speak much more confidently than I do now. So fingers crossed for me, everybody. Let's hope that this goes well when I get to stage.
Well, you just need to stay trusting in your body, mind, and in your intuition, I think. I mean, and you'll be great. If you get into a mental and striving to be intellectual or something, you're going to be unsatisfied.
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head there. I think it is, as soon as we go into that, I need to be something else that other people need to be.
Right.
Or I think that they want me to be.
Yes, exactly.
I am this very basic tool. My body is a very basic tool. It has very basic functions. And when I bring it back to the safety and basics of actually what the body does, and sometimes that is quite raw and disgusting, but actually all those disgusting bits that we hide, all the bottom burps and the yawns and, everything else that goes on in between, that's actually magical clearance of these knots dissipating out of your body. And I've learned to absolutely love it when those things happen. And even love it when it happens with other people who come near me, because sometimes people only need to be somewhere near me when they've worked with me, and it starts to happen, and then I feel and I sense their embarrassment. So we make light of it, we have fun with it, and
right,
instead of weird again. And that's
right.
I think that's a very important part of this journey. So Michael, so tell us, what advice would you give someone just going into the working environment, maybe from uni, or perhaps changing jobs completely, maybe starting up their own business? What advice would you give somebody who's just starting out into that field?
Well, the thing that comes to mind from who I am and my training and experience is that early in our life, we are authored by other people, by our family, our parents, our religion, our spiritual upbringing, our peer groups, or whatever. You know, we try to do things because other people approve of that, or we feel they want us to. Later in life, we author ourselves. We shape what we do, our career, or whatever, because of our own values or principles. But that's not the deepest expression of us. The deepest expression of us is to be authored by spirit, to allow our mind to get out of the way and our sort of personal preferences, and to let spirit direct, you know, the life force. Life wants something from each of us. And I talk about that as, and we do in Constellations work in general, as destiny. And when you surrender to your destiny, then you're gonna really be fulfilled. And it's hard to do that. It's not easily a young person's game, quite honestly.
No, because there's lots of ego there as a youngster, isn't there? And it's not cool to break away sometimes. Although I think more and more it is happening, and we can see younger people breaking away from the dogma of everything that has been going on for so long. And when you see the difference that they're making in the world, but when you think of people like Stephen Bartlett, he's 28, he's making absolute phenomenal waves. His podcast, The Diary of a CEO, is just absolutely mind-blowing with the people that he gets on, but all the deep insight that he gives into how his time is of the essence, especially as a CEO. And actually what he does with that time now is micromanaged in a way, so that he's getting the ultimate out of the best of his game.
Cool.
And he seems to be getting more and more spiritual in connection with himself. His diary is very, very interesting. It's a really, I would certainly recommend Stephen Bartlett, and I'm sure you're all listening to him anyway. But Michael, you've been setting up, professionally coaching and leading teams, and you're the chief exec of the Collective Edge. You're also an author, co-author, okay, of integral approaches to the Agile world. And tell us a little bit about your book.
A lot of people listening to this might not know about it. It's a trend in the business world toward something called Agile software development, which I tell people it doesn't have much to do with software. It does a little bit, but mainly building software is a very complex human endeavor, cooperative game. And it was done in a sort of an old-fashioned way for a long time, in a very engineering way. And about 20 years ago, there was a sea change where it started to become done in a much more collaborative, adaptive kind of a way. And it, you know, most companies in the world are trying to adopt it because it's just a more modern way to work. But it brings a lot of cultural change. It brings power structure changes. It brings, you know, managers can't be in command and control mode as they used to be. That used to be a paradigm that worked. You know, they need to be a very different kind of a leader for the whole thing to work, and trust their teams a lot more. So that's a lot beyond just a different software process, right? It gets into the culture, it gets into leadership mindset. And the book it's called Agile Transformation, is a framework for thinking about how to do an organizational transformation in an integral way. Integral is a field developed by a man named Ken Wilber, and it's also a worldwide movement. There's thousands of practitioners of it, and it's basically the ability to take multiple perspectives on things, to not be from a black and white point of view, to understand different perspectives on the world, different levels of maturity of worldview kind of concept, and that people are at different worldview levels, and so that creates conflict and misunderstanding. So it's a framework that helps people sort of it's like a Rosetta Stone for what's going on in a very complex environment. It helps you decipher and sort of create a place for different things that happen, and so that you can understand them better.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So I teach and develop a lot of people that are called enterprise coaches, that are in this endeavor of leading agile transformations or different kind of organizational transformations. And one of the principles that we teach is one of the main competencies. The first competency is using yourself as an instrument of transformation. You are the most powerful tool of transformation you have. So that gets us into the realm that we've been talking about, not exactly directly, but still, how do I use myself in service of somebody else, and my reactions to them, like in coaching them, how do I make my sense making, how I make sense of the world, how do I make that visible to people, rather than get into a competitive game about it or something, trading. People on Twitter and on social media tend to totally, they don't even listen to each other in the least, right? A lot of times. So it's trying to get to a deeper level of a different kind of conversation, a different kind of way of collaborating and seeing the world, understanding the world.
Sounds absolutely perfect, and something I think that we all need, especially as we're sort of going more into the world of AI is changing considerably. When I think of Mo Gaudet's book, Scary Smart, then if you're going to make an impact on the AI in a positive way, then that is absolutely the smartest thing you can do. So congratulations for doing that. So everybody should check out Michael Spayd and The Collective Edge, the Agile leadership culture on the inside out. And one more question for you, Michael, before we go. It's been an absolute delight to have you here. Who would you like to listen to as a guest on the Weird World of Knowing? And why?
Nish Cote would be fun. Peter Mary would be fun.
Two beautiful people who I have got down in my diary, and haven't recorded those yet. Right.
Let's see if I can think of somebody beyond our mutual network. You're on Clubhouse, aren't you? You do something like this on Clubhouse. Do you know about the Weird Ones? Which is a group on. Oh, they're interesting. I mean, I haven't listened for months, so it's possible. I would be surprised if they've gone away, but there's some interesting people in there. It's called the Weird Ones. So, I mean, it rhymes with yours.
I will be looking them up on Clubhouse. Thank you for that, Michael. Michael, how can people get in touch with you to experience anything that you do, everything that you do? How can what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, probably on my website, which is thecollectiveedge.com, with hyphens between the hyphen edge hyphen or the hyphen collective hyphen edge.com, or on LinkedIn. I am M Spayd, MSPAYD, on LinkedIn.
And of course, all those details are going to be underneath the podcast and
Yeah.
on the YouTube channel. So do have a
Great.
look underneath as well. Michael, it's been an absolute gift having you here. It's been beautiful
Thank you.
to connect with you again. Just
Yeah,
love
thank you,
and
Rachel.
enjoy your energy. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
You are so informative and helpful, as you were
Well,
when we first met. So
thank you so much. You're very generous.
and we shall see you all very soon. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening on The Weird World of Knowing. I do hope you enjoyed your time with us. I'm Rachel Earing, your host, and gosh, I'm having a ball putting all of this together for you, so I hope you are too. And if you are, please do like, subscribe, and share with those who might actually benefit from these weird moments of knowing as they realise how many of their own they've been having all their life. Take care, and we'll see you next week.